Hello, everyone. Welcome to another wonderful session from Dr. Jamal Anwar Taha, who will be talking about forensic linguistics to Kurdish researchers. We're really excited to listen to him. And before taking much of his time, I'm going to pass the microphone to him. Go ahead, Jamal.
Thank you so much. Welcome. I don't know if only one participant is here, but I try to talk about it, even if it is one person, even if there's no others. So I'll be trying to, because it is supposed to be to Kurdish researchers, but I try to introduce forensic linguistics, and then I try to talk about what forensic linguistics is about. Of course, the outline of this presentation is about how we define forensic linguistics, and then what's the history of forensic linguistics, what are the areas of study, and then the application to foreign language teaching and learning, as well as the types of forensic texts, as well as the ways of collecting and analyzing forensic linguistic data. And I try to propose some research topics for forensic linguistic researchers. And I also talk about an example of an organization for forensic linguists around the world. So let's begin our presentation with this question, in which you can answer the question at the end. How can we use language to solve and prevent crime? That is a very interesting question that a lot of people may think that language and crime are connected. Yes, language is connected to everything, by the way. Language is connected to medicine, language is connected to law, language is connected to every single discipline in the world. So so is forensic linguistics is a science? Definitely, according to Dan Belt states that the primary difference between forensic and non-forensic methods in linguistics is the scientific approach. So in forensic linguistics, the scientific method requires the hypothesis testing, which is a kind of legitimation independent testing of the method for its accuracy. That's why these tests are usually performed with robust controls regarding data quantity and the data resource and the analytical objectivity. So for this reason, we have what's known as linguistic fingerprint, just like, or linguistic, it's known as, just like in individual fingerprint, we have a linguistic fingerprint. Everyone's language is different from others. So that's why, so as to solve, or so as to approach this, we treat this as a science, because forensic, we have forensic geography, forensic medicine, forensic, all the forensic types. And to solve a crime, we need forensic linguistics. We need the science of forensic linguistics, which is often claimed as humans use language differently. That's why each one of us has a type, has a particular type of language, which is known as idiolect. So my language is different from yours, and yours is different from others. So that's why each one's language is unique in its own way. So because I write in one way and you write in another way. So how do you define forensic linguistics? Of course, the main definition is that the application of linguistics to legal issues. So linguistic theories may be applied to the analysis of language samples in an inquiry. So forensic linguistics may try to use observations, may use the language that is being collected from the criminals, from the culprits, from the potential suspects or the suspects, through ways of language through linguistic analysis, like conversation analysis, like discourse analysis, like grammar, like cognitive linguistics. All of these are employed, are used, speech act theory, used to analyze people's language so that whether they have committed the crime or not, or to solve the crime. I will try to show you some cases if we have enough time. Forensic linguists or forensic linguistics and forensic phonetics are also used in criminal investigations, in counterterrorism cases, intelligence, and surveillance as well. So forensic linguistics and phonetic evidence are routinely used in criminal courts. Most of the forensic linguists argue that forensic linguistics as a scientific study in which we try to apply it to law or legal settings. The forensic linguistics can usually be divided into three distinct areas. So what are the areas that we use forensic linguistics in? Number one, legal texts. Number two, legal process. Number three, expert witness. Usually in these three cases, fortunately, it is widely used in the United States and United Kingdom, but it is not used in my country, which is Iraq. I even recommended, since I'm supervising one of the MA thesis, I try to give recommendations to the legal authorities or the legal apparatus so as to use linguists or expert linguists so as to solve crime, because some of these crimes can be solved by linguists. In the case of legal texts, usually linguists are searching for arcane vocabulary, complicated grammar, infrequent punctuation, which typify the legal texts, and the problems arise from these texts. In the case of legal process, of course, linguists examine the nature of police interviews. That's why we have interrogations, two interrogations, three interrogations. So these interrogations will be handed over to the legal experts, and then they will try to work on it. Then linguists try to serve as expert witness. They may be summoned in the court of law to have their say in these particular cases that are hard to solve. There were some cases in which linguists try to track down the criminals, track down even try to make some decisive decisions at the end. In these cases, we have confusability in rival trademarks, authorship documents, and the origin of the account of asylum seekers, so on and so forth. So the application of linguistic research and methods to the law, including the evaluation of written evidence and the language of legalization, can be seen in many situations. So forensic linguistics try to answer the following questions. Who said this? Who wrote this? And why did he or she say this? That's the question that we try to ask every time so as to solve a potential crime. So forensic linguists help to gain more information from language evidence. Of course, for non-linguists, we try to give account for non-linguists, for investigators, for judges, for juries, for lawyers, for counterterrorism groups, for counterterrorism bodies. So what is the importance of forensic linguistics? The importance can be seen in the idea of how we try to dissect the conversation patterns and what are the kinds of language that are used by suspects, whether they did the crime or not, whether they can be nailed by their own words or not. So the kind of moves the speakers and writers make in a conversation and written texts, particularly in the case of body language, the words and their meanings. Sometimes why we have many interrogations, because so as to see some discrepancies, whether they are compatible to the conversations we're matching up or adding up to one another or not, or there are some discrepancies in which to find the culprit. So the history of forensic linguistics came back to Jan Svartvik's main paper. He tried to delve into a case which was known the Evans statement. He wrote an article in the title "The Evans Statement: A Case of Forensic Linguistics" in 1968. Actually, Jan Svartvik wants to examine the documents that incriminating parts of set of 4 linked statements purportedly dedicated to police officers by Timothy Evans, then which incriminating him in the murder of his wife and a baby daughter, which had grammatical style of measurability and different forms. So it was later discovered that Evans had been convicted and executed for the double murder, that both victims had actually been murdered by Evans' landlords rather than Timothy Evans. As it was said in the previous slides, Jan Svartvik coined the term in 1968 in his famous paper, The Case of Evans. So it started mainly in the UK, then USA. Shoei is one of the leading figures, so the key figures in the case of forensic linguistics. I will try to, if anyone wants to be provided with a book, with the Shoei's books, which is we have downloaded it. We have accessed the books by Shoei. But usually forensic linguistics are mainly used in the UK, USA, and Australian courts. So forensic linguistics is so new that the history is still being written. It's particularly in the Middle Eastern countries. So the relation between language and law is inseparable to language. Willy-nilly, we have to use language in the court cases. So the lawyers, sometimes there's a conflict between lawyers and linguists. So in this case, lawyers and linguists have different aims. So that's why lawyers try to either exonerate someone or convict someone. But we as language experts, we try to show the truth, whether we try to show though they say that we are seeking the truth, but of course lawyers are trying to win the case, because the most important thing is winning the case. But we as linguists, we try to look at things objectively. We try to have language as it is, without being authored by anyone or any particular person. So lawyers try to persuade the jury, linguists try to present an opinion and explain that opinion. That's why we have different aims. So forensic linguistics is applied in the following different areas: in the legal language, which is known as law language, in judicial procedures language, and linguistic evidence in judicial procedures, which is United States is lucky, or the legal body in the United States is lucky to have that, but we are unlucky to have it, because in our country we don't. So the application of forensic linguistics, these are some of the cases that forensic linguistics are being used or being employed. Authorship identification or attribution, whether this particular piece of writing refers to which author. Plagiarism, word meanings. What do you mean by this word? Trademarks, criminal activities like bribery, like extortion, like sextortion, like solicitation. Contract disputes, like insurance disputes, like fraud, like jury instructions. Non-English language cases in some English spoken countries, perjury, copyright infringement, plain language, and legal language. See, so these are the cases that mainly forensic linguists try to work on. So that's why on these cases, we try to analyze the meaning of words in contracts, in statutes, in the legal statutes and laws. So we try to search for the ordinary meaning and what is behind this meaning. Not only the ordinary meaning. Sometimes the ordinary meaning, what does this mean? And then what are the implications? Because that's why in forensic linguistics, we use all the other micro-linguistic parts like phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, pragmatics, all the related parts within linguistics. So we try to analyze the meaning of non-language symbols. What do these symbols mean? What's known as like examples of cross burning. So speech act analysis of language claim it constitutes confessions, threats, conspiracies, and these kind of things. So the analysis of covert tape recordings and what do they mean? What are the things that, or lip reading? Sometimes legal experts they can be present in the courtrooms so as to lip read the criminals, and then the lawyers or the other legal bodies, whether they are trying to solve the crime or they are trying to having a sort of biased opinion. Secret language and code analysis, the slang and the jargon ones. So the establishment of possible authors of document through grammatical and stylistic analysis. For example, could be person X have authored document Y. So we try to see whether this person has said this to that person and this in these particular cases. So the analysis of presupposition, which is also a kind of pragmatic tool, we use it in questions by investigators and attorneys and attorneys. Usually, it's good or it's recommendable that linguists should be present even in the questioning or cross-examinations, because there is a schematic analysis of linguistic processing, and then there is language and memory involves readability of information and instructions and their meanings. So in some cases, we use sociolinguistic analysis, just like Lebov's one in New York, a setting of Black language, or known as Black vernacular cases, forms of address, convergence, and divergence. So the examples of application, of course, we try to objectively establish the meaning of wordings in contracts, statutes, or decisions. For example, Spanish surnames, the complete loss of sight of both eyes, the consent, these keywords that can be used in many of these cases that can be seen in the United States legal courts, legal system. So scientifically compare language samples to indicate whether a certain person could have authored a particular ransom note, especially in the case of in the case of kidnapping, hijacking, and these kind of things, or threatening letters or confessions, or nowadays social media threatening messages. So the application of well-established speech act standards, we try to apply the speech act theory on the language that's employed by potential suspects. So what are the main branches of forensic linguistics? Legal processes, legal language, and linguistic evidence. These are the main areas in which we try to focus on. In the case of legal process, of course, in any legal process, we have the investigation stage, the trial stage, and the appeal stage. In these three stages, we try to analyze the gathered information during the legal process. So the legal process includes all of these three packages. So with these three packages, we try to, whether in the investigation stage we miss something, or in the trial stage we miss something, we try in the appeal stage we miss something. Maybe someone is wrongfully convicted. There are many cases in which some people were wrongfully convicted of a crime that they didn't commit. So during the legal process, language is used as an instrument. That's the key that we try to focus, because usually during the legal process, sometimes lawyers and the lawyers of both sides, they try to provoke. They use a kind of provoking language. And what was the mind? What was in your mind then? So we try to gather together all of these pieces of evidence and analyze them objectively. So the legal language means a language that's used by persons connected to the legal profession, like lawyers, jurists, and legislative draftsmen in their professional capabilities. Because sometimes not only in the criminal investigation or the criminal process or the criminal stage or these legal investigations or legal processes, some lawyers, some jurists, and some judges are biased. So in this case, there should be a system in which, through this system, there are many witnesses. One of these witnesses were the language experts, so as to have decisive, so-called the expert witness for these cases. So two basic types of legal language can be seen. A language of legal texts, which is lawmaking instruments, or the language of legal practice, how they are practicing it, how they designed it, how they drafted it, and how they apply it. So Goddard in 2010 discussed the following kinds of legal writing: academic legal writing, as in law journals; judicial language, legal writing as a court judgments; and then legislative legal writing in the laws, regulations, contracts, and treaties. So all of these can be seen in what's known as the legal process or the legal language, which is the second type of forensic linguistics. So the legal language or the legal English takes into its fold its use in the context of legal documents, as we said, licenses, court pleadings, summons, briefs, judgments, and legal correspondence between two legal bodies. Ashko Kelka, a veteran law expert, identifies 5 types of situational contexts within legal discourse or communication, which is quoted from Tendon and Bell. So the lawgiver to the judge and the counsel, and then the judge to the counsel, and vice versa. That the judgments, briefs, and courts exchange, and so on, and the consultation among judges, counsels, men of law, as part of the legal discussions, or the judge to the jury, the counsel to the clients, and vice versa, or between the ordinary citizens. So these are the 5 types of situational contexts in which language and law can be seen, because whenever there is equity, as the sign of this conference, whenever there's equity, everyone is equal before the law. In this case, people are trying to feel comfortable, because they say that the legal process takes its course, and we trust the legal process. So the linguistic evidence, the third type of it, the linguistic evidence based on what? Based on the analysis of either the author identification, the forensic stylistics, what kind of the style that this person has, and the discourse analysis, analyzing the discourse, and then the linguistic dialectology. For example, you belong to Southern dialect, you belong to Northern dialect, or to Midwestern dialect. So which kind of dialect are you talking? And then in the case of Unabomber, the famous case in the United States, they track down through what's known as linguistic dialectology, because the professor who was behind the Unabomber was using a kind of dialect which is Midwestern. That's why they tracked down through what's known as linguistic dialectology. So forensic phonetics, but with the advance of social media, this faded. This is beginning to fade, and with the advance of AI, it's more complicated even. Even in the case of linguistic evidence, we have what's known as graphology, which is orthology as well. We try to use the spelling system. The kind of spelling system that you have is different from the spelling system that I have. So with that, we try to nail down the criminal by using their writings. Or phonetic morphology, what kind of word order, what kind of sound system that they're using, the syntax, semantics, and discourse, of course. These are used as to be admitted as a proof. That's why we try to use all of this material as a proof in a court of law. So these are the famous cases in the United States and Europe. Unabomber is and his manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future. He was a university professor, by the way, but conducted a rampage of bombings in the Midwestern parts, even in the southern parts of the United States. You can just Google it. There is a documentary about Unabomber, in which lasted for more than 10 years. Then at the end, he was caught. The other case, which is Andre Breivik, in which he was the perpetrator of the Norway 2011 attack, took the life of more than 20 to 30 people, I suppose. So how do we collect data for forensic linguistics? That's the question that we should ask ourselves. These are the ways in which the forensic text types, we try to collect data. Emergency calls. Usually the emergency calls are recorded, then we analyze them, and we try to identify those through phonetic identification, or which is known as forensic phonetics. Ransom demands and other threat texts. We have there are some demands on the ransom: hate mails, suicide letters, final death row statements, confessions and denials by public persons, terrorism cases, extortion cases, cross-cultural communication, similarities in large corpora. We try to use this as well. Multimodal aspects of victim narratives. Emergency calls can be operators, can include the intonation. What are the intonation? What's the voice speech? What is the timely response? What is the cooperation? What is how to discover a hoax call? So we try to is there hesitation inside the call? Is there incomplete or short answers? Is there a void of giving information? So we try to analyze these emergency calls based on the operator's skills and based on the hoax calls, or how to discover the hoax call. So, or more common characteristics of ransom demands and other threats of texts. For example, the anonymity of these calls, anonymity of these ransom demands, to cause fear of the receptor to get what the writer wants. or some examples of threat texts like hate mails, like kidnapping, like mobile phone texts, like terrorism cases. But the case of terrorism is widely exploited by many bodies to pin terrorism charges against anyone that's against the mindset or the belief of the other person, which is something that we should have a sort of a rubric on that basis. We try to give decisive decisions. So I want you to listen to this case, which is, or watch this case, which is very interesting. And how did they find the culprit in the United States? Do I have time, Dr. Den?
Yes, we still have time. 10
Martin
minutes.
Bayfield.
approximately.
Well, in the aftermath of serious crime, the police use a Martin Bayfield. Well, in the aftermath of Martin Bayfield. Well, in the aftermath of serious crime, the police use a whole array of techniques to track down the perpetrators. And tonight, Martin's been to investigate one of the latest forensic techniques.
This street in Stoke-on-Trent was the scene of a house fire that back in 2009 shocked the local community. When the fire brigade arrived, they discovered a father and two children had escaped the blaze. But tragically, the mother had died. Through tears, Christopher Burks explained to firefighters how he had saved his two children and battled the flames to try and rescue his wife Amanda from the loft bedroom. But it was to no avail. She had died in the blaze. But, like the recent high-profile Philpott case in which 6 children died, when the emergency services started to investigate the fire, certain things just didn't stack up.
Fire brigade went into the premises and they realised that Amanda's body wasn't in a natural position. It looked as if she'd been incapacitated in some way, and also the fire alarms had been tampered with.
Forensic tests showed that the blaze had not killed Amanda. She was already dead when the fire began. This left police with a number of questions. How and when had she died? Throughout the day, more than a dozen text messages were sent from Amanda's phone. The last one at 7:48 in the evening. But when family members read the messages, they thought something was wrong. The text didn't look like they'd been written by Amanda. But could they give a clue as to what had happened that day? Detectives began to question Christopher's story. Could it be possible that he had murdered his own wife and then used her mobile phone to send text messages to cover his tracks? Police needed expert help. So they came to linguistics specialist Dr. Tim Grant. When he's not teaching, he works with police forces from all over the UK. He analyses the use of language in written documents, everything from emails to letters, to prove who wrote them. Staffordshire Police asked Tim to look at the text sent from Amanda's phone. Could he establish who had written them?
First thing you need to do is establish what is consistent in each of their texting style. And to do that, you have to have a large collection of text messages for each of them. For Amanda Burks, her phone was destroyed in the fire. And so the police had to collect those messages from friends and work colleagues and family members. And they collected a set of 200 text messages. And we had a similar set of 200 text messages from Christopher Burks.
Tim got to work scrutinising the texting styles used by Christopher and Amanda. So, Tim, we've got some examples of the disputed text messages that Christopher claims Amanda sent. What is it about them that leaps out to you?
We've got this first message, which was sent at about 1 o'clock. This message says, "Not sure yet. I'm just talking with Chris." And we have the spelling of just, which is JST, which is typical of Christopher Burks' style. We have the spelling of with as WIV, with, and that's a Christopher Burks style feature that only he uses and Amanda Burks never uses.
So that was at 1 o'clock. We then roll on, the clock is ticking, and there's another text comes through.
Okay, we have Don't, spelt DNT, is definitely a Christopher Burke's feature. He only spells it that way, and Amanda Burks only spells it DON''T.
Tim analysed 15 more texts sent from Amanda's phone that day. He concluded that Christopher Burks probably wrote all of them. Was there a time where suddenly these started to appear in the text message?
Yes, after 1239, there's no messages that you would attribute to Amanda Burks.
So detectives believe Burks probably killed his wife sometime before 1239 in the afternoon. And later that night, he set fire to the house to cover his tracks. Forensic linguistics was crucial to helping police solve the case.
It's important because it shows a full picture of what actually occurred on that day. There was some sort of planning post Amanda being murdered to try and cover his tracks.
Although he initially pleaded not guilty to murder, when prosecutors put all the evidence to Burks, he changed his plea to guilty on the first day of his trial. Christopher Burks must surely have thought he'd got away with murder, but he was nailed by his own words and is now serving a minimum of 19 years in prison.
So that is the example of forensic linguistic solving case. There are many cases in the United States in which there is a very good series in the United States which aired in some crime investigation channel on Discovery of Crime or something like this, because we are accessing it in Iraq through social media platforms. It's called Forensic Files. So through Forensic Files, we can see many of these forensic linguists solving many cases. So the suicide letter is also another kind of text type in which we try to look into the characteristics of it, the brevity, the concise, the evasiveness, the expressed guilt. So are there these kind of things exist in these kind of letters? So and what's the typical using of language? Because my language is different from your language and others, of course. So, final death row statements. For example, we try to look for forgiveness, whether that kind of person try to say, please forgive me, I try to did this. So, or speakers want to share something crucial in the case of final death row statements, or they want to die with dignity in the case of Unabomber. Confessions and denials by the public explain the aspects of the struggle and to conserve the honor. Sometimes some celebrities. So terrorism cases, as this is a very problematic one in which it's used and it is misused by many governments around the world. It is good to look into them, but it is sometimes misuse, as I said, by some for political purposes. Whatever they try to having a sort of avenging the political group or specific group, they try to pin terrorism to these kind of people. So the intervention of a linguist in the analysis of conversations before these went to trial, and these can be helpful, of course. The audio recordings, we try to look into the audio recordings, linking words, the language, and these the terrorism cases. The interrogation is also one of the text types in which we look into. But being present in the interrogation is helpful for the language experts. Recording the interrogation, looking into it, the forensic phonetics plays a crucial role. Analyzing the questioning techniques using linguistic means as speech acts, style, register, tone, implicative, presupposition, locutionary, elocutionary, placutionary act. All of these acts that can be used in the case of interrogations. So the multimodal aspects of a victim's narrative, using of gestures, using of gazes, using of postural orientations, co-expressive semiotic partners in the legal discourse. So in the case of, there were many cases, for example, Doc Maniart in recent work in 2006 says that the studying courtroom language without the visual components, which loses the phenomena and erases the relevant activities and participants orient to a legal performance, which means that we have to look into the visual process whether the visual scene will tell us something. So the cross-cultural communication, as we said, between those engaged in the practice of the law and those in the field of forensic linguistics. So if the work of forensic linguistics were to be heeded by the lawyers, to a great extent, then the legal system will be improved much more. Why? Because we will remove some of the bureaucracies, we will remove some of the misunderstandings that are happening. So how do we analyze the texts or the data? So there are many ways to analyze the data in which we have to take into consideration several important things. Language is like a fingerprint. We have a kind of profiling, which is known as speaker or writer profiling, in which we use it as in a subdiscipline which is known as forensic stylistics. We use them so as to know the kind of words, the kind of style that this particular personality is using. So the analysis can help identify speakers or writers' nationality, native language, identity, occupation, training, education. So the use of comparative methods, we compare this and this. We try to look for patterns. Maybe a crime is committed, we try to look for patterns because usually criminals try to repeat the pattern that they are trying to do in the case of ransom, in the case of gang raping, in the case of many situations that can be seen. So what are the linguistic markers used to identify the potential culprits by forensic linguistics? Of course, the style, the voice identification, the punctuation, the phrase choice, the authorship markers, the syntax, the discourse, the conversation, all of these things, we try to use them so as to have a big picture. So what are the challenges that forensic stylistics? Of course, forensic texts are normally short, like text messages, ransom notes. Therefore, we do not have enough data to establish a solid argument. In this case, in the case of that person, Amanda Burks, they couldn't access the text messages, so that's why they could collect the messages from their friends and families. So which linguistic features are reliable? How reliable are they? That is also a question that we should look into it. So our language changed. So that's why, how can we be sure about the identity of the speaker, the identity of the writer, the identity of the author? So this is also a challenge that we have. Can we use one of these to narrow down the list of suspects? That's also a question, or that's a challenge, especially in forensic stylistics. So there is also, as we said, to look into the dialectology, which is known as linguistic dialectology. We identify the culprit by the dialect that person is speaking. But this challenge, there is a challenge due to social media, due to television, in which a lot of people are trying to duplicate the dialects from other places. Voice identification, or another sub-branch of forensic linguistics, is known as forensic phonetics, or voice identification, in which deals with the speaker profiling narrow. The field of suspects includes speaker's sex, age, linguistic, regional, and social background, in which we try to identify the voice of that person if we have recordings of that. If no, we try to look into the style of that writing, or we try to look for the sound aspects, for the calls that they are making, In this case, we will try to look into the social background, the sex, and the age of that person. In which the forensic phonetics deals with the speaker's identification, combining auditory and acoustic analysis to provide an opinion, such as a voice in a conversation or telephone call or of a particular person. So, so voice identification technique there are some applications we have in which we try to look into some of these texts or some of these recordings, then we will analyze them. So forensic phonetics goal is to produce accurate transactions of what is being said. The audio recordings like speaker profiles and speaker identification. First, we profile it, then we identify the speaker. So through profiling, we pin down the dialect, and then the age, the gender, and then the second stage, which is the to identify the speaker, who that speaker is. Of course, in voice-based evidence is an important part of any criminal investigation and has commonly included such things like threats left on answering machine, or robbery caught on videotapes, or confession recording during a police interrogation, or something like this. So in the technological age of mobile phones, voicemails, AI, voice recognition softwares, applications, we have some challenges, but we have a lot at hand so as to decipher. These technicalities, these are some of the technicalities: the quality of the voice, the rhythm, the tempo, the intonation, all of these things, we look into them. The lineup of several speakers, the language, the incident that's recorded. So according to Holland, 2010, he tries to look into the forensic phonetics through the areas of forensic phonetics and then the operations in which Holland tries to pin down the criminals through forensic phonetics. So what are the challenges of forensic phonetics? The quality of recording, as we said, noise, which makes hard to have an objective analysis. The authentication of the recording, if there is any change in the recording, this is also very problematic. The other thing in the forensic linguistic is authorship profiling. So the linguistic profiling is used to narrow down a suspect that identify the suspect, that the person who authored that kind of thing. So in the case of we look into grammar, we look into lexis, the words, the lexical items, and we look into the punctuation as well. So there is also a mysterious case in which up until now we don't know who is the author of that book. Even forensic phonetics all around the world, forensic authorship or authorship attribution all around the world, they couldn't figure out this book, which is written anonymously. Shall I play it? 5 minutes, 3 or 5 minutes. Professor Data?
Normally, sessions go until 45 so that we can get ready for the other session. But if you want to wrap up in a few minutes, that's okay.
Okay. Just 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay.
I've always tried to encode secrets. Military communication, love letters, forbidden knowledge. Sooner or later, most secret texts have been decoded. Among all of history's cryptic writings, one has stood out. This text has defied all attempts to unveil its secret for centuries. The Voynich manuscript. It's the world's most mysterious book, written by an unknown author in an absolutely singular alphabet and illustrated with puzzling images. The secret hidden between these lines.
Yet another expert has taken on the challenge. For the first time, the physical materials of the Voynich manuscript will be analyzed. Maybe ink, pigments, and parchment will offer a key to the Voynich enigma. The headquarters of the U.S. Military Intelligence Service, these experts succeeded in decoding Japan's so-called Purple Code. Friedrich Friedman, the service's director, was one of the world's best cryptographers. Practice between jobs, Friedman and his team decoded historical cryptic texts. One by one, the codes were cracked. But one ancient text stubbornly defied all attempts to decode it: the Voynich manuscript. Unnerved, the cryptographers gave up. It's the only code they were unable to crack. Questions about the roughly 200-page manuscript with its inexplicable symbols had already been raised for decades. At the beginning of the 20th century, an antiques dealer from New York visited Villa Mondragone near Rome. He was looking for precious books. The name of the American dealer was Wilfrid Voynich. In Villa Mondragone, many historical texts from a Jesuit school were stored. One of the trunks Wilfrid Voynich was allowed to inspect came from the estate of one of the most famous learned men of the 17th century, Athanasius Kircher.
That's enough for this one. That's also a problem of authorship, which is quite hard and still defies the all the linguists, all the cryptographs. So there are some movies related to forensic linguistics. Robert Galbraith's The Cuckoo's Calling. It turns out that the Robert Galbraith is actually J.K. Rowling. The Criminal Minds series and Forensic Files series that you can check. So problems with forensic linguists, of course, there are some restrictions. There are some restrictions of what we write, how we write, and what we say. I try to speed up. Since forensic linguistics deals with the probabilities, not certainties, it's essential to refine the field of study further. So there have been cases where it was my impression that the evidence on which people were freed or convicted was iffy in one or in another way. It was said by Edward Finnegan. So these are some of the topics for researchers that they try to research about. Right now, I'm supervising Rubar Sadiq. She is looking into extortion and sextortion cases in Iraqi Sulaimani courts. There's an organization of foreign linguists, forensic linguistics, or forensic linguists. And the key figure in forensic linguistics is Roger Shuey, PhD, Professor Emeritus, and he has quite some books. The summary, the application of linguistic techniques to investigate crime in which language data plays an important role, using linguistic or stylistic analysis to find a potential culprit. Phonetics provides us with a method to investigate speech data, speaker profiling, and prove them for further examination. And the analysis of grammatical, lexical, and orthographical features can provide us with essential clues of authorship. which is it is also a new topic that we can do it. And thank you so much. I am sorry for taking so much time. I had a lot, but the time was not on my side.
John, go ahead, April.
I thought you shared so much valuable information. I feel like a whole new world has been opened up. I was Googling things as you were speaking. And I just found it very relevant to the job of an instructor in academia. You know, we're trying to determine sometimes in plagiarism cases who did really author this. And some of us are armchair linguists, I think, or forensic linguists, because we're always saying, this is not how you speak. So how is it that you authored this paper? So I just felt like you gave me a lot of language to Google, to research, and I really thank you for your time.
Most
That's a
welcome.
great point, April. And I also wondered like how AI will affect this in the upcoming years, right? So yeah, I'm really excited. Now, I'm not sure if you're interested in exploring that area more, Jamal, like in relationship with AI, but because we realize that AI is kind of dominating the language we're using as well. But yeah, I'm curious to know, maybe it will be a future research for you, right?
Maybe I have, sorry for interruption, but maybe I have a very good solution for this. Just speak with that person and then compare the writing of that person to the writing he supposedly wrote it, and then compare it. It's called comparative forensic linguistics. Then you nail it, because you know that that person does not look like that writing. So this means that you are not the writer of that piece of work.
Yes. Thank you so much again. I realize we have 2 minutes left, so I have to close the room, but thank you so much again and again.
Thank you.
So look forward to seeing you in the upcoming days. Bye-bye.
Most welcome. Goodbye.